we'll get started. So we're here to talk about inner sourcing. It's a buzzword that you hear a lot about. There are lots of news articles about it. But as I was saying earlier, it's a new term for something that people and software developers have been doing for a long time, which is applying the principles, the ideas, the behaviors of open source inside the business environment, inside proprietary software development. And those ideas are about openness, transparency, collaboration. These are all things that are easy to say and actually pretty difficult to do in practice. And the practitioners who become really good at it find that this work and this new way of behaving inside companies is actually pretty transformative. It's transformative not only from a software development workflow perspective, it's transformative from a cultural perspective. But it is hard to do. And to that end, I'm really excited to share some of the practitioners who are at the forefront of this work, coming together from a really diverse set of industries to share some of these best practices, to share their war stories, and to share their successes and challenges with us here today. So to that end, I'll go ahead and start introducing folks. I'll start with Panna, Pavangadkar. Panna is part of the organization at Bloomberg. She and I have met several times and collaborated, and I've always been blown away. I've been so impressed by Bloomberg, which most people think of as a media company really doing some truly innovative things when it comes to software development. So really excited to have you on the panel. Super excited to have Yasuhiro Inami joining us from Japan, from Line, one of the largest and fastest growing social networks. He's a mobile developer, and I think he's going to have a very interesting perspective about why this work is relevant to what they're doing. Jeremy, really excited to have you here. Jeremy is the CTO for Walmart's e-commerce divisions. You can just imagine the scale of impact both inside that organization, which is so vast, but also to the world at large, and why open source is so critical for this company that many of think as a traditional retailer, and why Walmart has had to embrace and must embrace and continues to embrace what we think of as modern software development. Joan is here from HP, and she's going to be sharing, she's in our conversation is sort of blown away by how passionate Joan is about the work of social coding, about inner sourcing. So really excited to get your perspective. And then finally, Jeff from IBM. Again, IBM, you think of IBM as a company that's been a traditional software company for so long. What I have been blown away by at IBM is how focused and dedicated and methodical and thoughtfully they have embraced some of the principles of inner sourcing. And Jeff in particular has used a lot of sort of big data and analytics techniques to make software development better at IBM. So I'm excited for you to share that as well. To kick things off, I'd love for each of you to introduce yourself briefly. If you could talk about what's your role at your company, what are the business reasons why inner sourcing is important to your company, and cribbing a little bit from Peter Thiel, what's the one thing that you've learned about inner sourcing that you think most people wouldn't know? Panna, why don't you start?
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. So I head up what we call the developer experience team for Bloomberg. The focus of the team is to improve or to continue to improve our developer productivity and make sure that our developers are focusing on the innovations that we need to provide to our end consumers on a daily basis. Bloomberg, as Kakul said, a lot of folks know Bloomberg as media, news, radio, TV, but our core product is the Bloomberg Terminal, which is our financial product, and it provides information or is available to provide information. And our development community, our engineering staff, is really working on innovation on a daily basis. InnerSource, as Kakul said, is not new to Bloomberg. We've been developing the product for multiple years now. And our competitive advantage is really in being able to innovate, come up with new ideas, and get them out to our specialized consumers on a regular basis at the speed that they require it to be competitive in the market. So the idea for InnerSource was not new. It's just that we continue to evolve on the practice that was already there. We used to call it collaboratively sourced, which is really working with each other and being able to move the product forward. But now it's a term, and we really leverage the term to push the idea to its boundaries, to its limits. I don't think there's one thing that I would call as a success criteria, but it's a multi-pronged approach, really. It is about getting the community excited about being able to contribute to somebody else's code. It's about being excited about being able to move the product forward or to be able to contribute to a feature which I may not be directly responsible for, but I think I can add value and to the end product. And it's that empowerment that the developers get, which is the exciting piece. So the three-pronged approach that I talk about is really about empowering the developers to be able to contribute code to other areas of the company, the product, and also creating the excitement and the buzz. And of course, ultimately, it's also getting the product as well as the management to buy in to the fact that this is actually good for us. And we've had success with not getting the resistance, or rather we've had success with getting the encouragement to push the boundaries as we've gone along this journey for the past couple of years.
Hi, my name is Yasuhiro Inami, and I am an iOS engineer from Line Corporation. Line is a messenger platform based in Japan, and it also has regional offices in Korea, Taiwan, Thai, Indonesia, and more. Line has started since 2011, and it has become as a global service with more than about 220 million monthly active users from all over the world. And recently, our company has listed on both Tokyo and New York Stock Exchange. And so far, we have developed over 100 mobile apps, including Messenger, B2C communication, news, camera, music, live streaming, so many, like comic, payment, and including games. And our goal here is to connect those communication and entertainment to the users more closer together. And to briefly introduce about myself, I was formerly doing web development in a small startup in Japan. And I'm now working in the Line for 5 years. While doing inner sourcing in the company, I also make my open source projects on GitHub using my weekend time. So I sometimes do open sourcing and sometimes, or mostly, doing the inner sourcing. And that's about me.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeremy King. I run Walmart Labs right here in Silicon Valley, but also in Portland, Carlsbad, India, Brazil, and kind of all over the United States. So you can imagine engineers, even though we're trying to keep the company small, we have people all over the place. So tools and development capabilities is what Walmart Labs is all about. So we're responsible for all of Walmart's e-commerce websites. So samsclub.com, walmart.com, Walmart Canada, Asda, which is the grocery store in the US, or in the UK. And there's about 11 different websites, and we've effectively had the ability to start from scratch. I started Walmart Labs 5 years ago, and we effectively tried to reboot the entire technology organization. And what we thought about when you do that is, if you have the chance to do it, you want to start using open source technology from the beginning. You want to be cloud ready, and you want to use tools that engineers around the internet are are familiar with, and we call it an irresistible developer environment. You want developers to have an irresistible experience when they're trying to develop code. And that means approval processes and code reviews and access to databases and machines. And so that's really been the goal of what Labs is all about. The great part about Walmart Labs is that as we've rebuilt the e-commerce website, we've had the opportunity to also talk to the 140 million people that come into Walmart stores every week and have built essentially a digital physical experience. And so we've launched capabilities like Walmart Pay, a new feature in Sam's Club called Scan and Go, where you can use your mobile phone to scan all the items in your cart and you don't have to go to the checkout machine. You just go straight to the door. And these kind of digital physical capabilities, as we build these things, make it as irresistible shopping experience for our customers. And as we've really seen moving into InnerSourcing, I think as Hiro, we were talking about the experience that developers have using open source. When you decide to do this internally, it's surprising how fast people get hold on to their own code and it's like, no, I don't want anybody to touch my code when it's internal. And once you sort of embrace it and you see the new teams come on, you really can show examples of places where not only people can contribute, but you can unlock bottlenecks. When you're working with large software companies and lots of different projects, you end up having inherent bottlenecks in some team or another. And it's awesome to have a team come in and say, hey, I can fix this bug or I can add this feature without impacting the overall roadmap of that important group. So we try and keep our teams very small, under 10 people, small dedicated teams that have end-to-end ownership. But in the end, when something gets hot, you want to make sure that people can go in and contribute. And InnerSourcing has been something we've been doing from the beginning. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Joan Watson. I love what I heard in the panel because a lot of it's true for Hewlett-Packard Enterprise as well. Interestingly enough, HP, from the perspective of open source, has been a major part of our DNA, right? Major contributor to the whole Linux strategy that's very a critical component of operations today. So open source has always been something that's been a major part of our DNA from that perspective. What's changed is the tools have matured, right? So now we have technology that supports that. And with respect to me, I have one of the most amazing jobs at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and it's really around enabling our workforce. And so we do a lot with transforming the way we work, the way we think about technology, a lot of paradigm shifts that we have in the company. I get the opportunity to do that with a number of user experience developers, data scientists, IoT, developers, and essentially working with partner teams that support, over 60,000 engineers at Hewlett-Packard. So it's huge space, but there's so much excitement about InnerSourcing, and we see it as just an amazing competitive advantage for Hewlett-Packard. Right? I mean, we have the ability to have a Google-like experience within our company because our workforce is so significant, and we've got amazing people that just, all disciplines, right? We're a very broad company, so we have all of that at our fingertips. So essentially, when I look at the whole idea of InnerSourcing and with the maturity of the tools, and it's just been one of those things that makes me skip into the office because we have the ability, to bring that into the hands of our developers. So we can see a major opportunity to accelerate our time to market. We have the ability to up the game of our workforce, right? Because people now have things that are much more open. And, there's challenges associated with that, right? So I won't make it sound all rosy, right? There's a big culture shift that we're working through, right? Because people have to think about things in different ways. So those are things we're trying to really work through, in the company, but we just see it as a major game changer for us.
Hello, I'm Jeff Jagoda. I work in IBM's CIO organization, specifically on a project we call Whitewater. Similar to Panna, our Whitewater project is about accelerating internal development teams. So we have a number of efforts that go into that, which include some education material, hosting some tools for our users, and then my team specifically, as Kakul suggested, looks at the data we get out of those tools to figure out what are our users doing and how does that actually impact our business. So certainly we see InnerSource as a way to improve efficiency through code reuse, but even beyond that, it's an amazing conduit for learning and exchanging ideas and facilitating innovation within IBM. I don't know if it's something that other people haven't noticed, but something that's been significant to me, though, is as we've dug into this idea of social coding has been that the coding part is sort of just the tip of the iceberg. It's just the surface level symptom of a much deeper, more fundamental transformation that's going on. And to really be successful with social coding, you have to ask some hard questions and maybe even change how your business is structured. You have to rethink, what does project management mean? How do you manage dependencies between your projects? How do you staff your teams? Are they specialized functional teams, or are they self-sufficient cross-functional teams? Or how do your central offices like security relate to your development teams? Is it a regulatory agency, or is it more of a training and enablement organization? So it's certainly an ongoing thing that we're continuing to learn in, and I don't think we're even close to being done, but it's pretty interesting and exciting work.
I love that, what you just said, Jeff. I mean, I love what everyone said, and I'm always blown away by the similarities and the differences that we hear. But Jeff, just teeing off of your last comment, which is, it's, adopting this new workflow is just the tip of the iceberg, and it leads to all of these much more important questions about how are we structured as an organization, how are we enabling this conversation. Yes, you're driving reuse. Yes, you're driving these things that we tie more specifically to ROI measurements, but fundamentally, it's about creating an environment to innovate in. And Jeremy, you said this really well, irresistible development environment. That's I think what we're all here to do, and it's great to hear that this is a key way that we're all making that happen. Putting you guys on the spot, it's very easy to talk about sort of the apple pie and rainbows, et cetera, related to inner sourcing and open source and openness and collaboration. Have you actually seen business results? Have you seen ROI that you measure or that you seek to measure that you can tie to some of the work here? Jeff, I'll have you start.
Sure. So we certainly want to tie it to business results. Explicitly tying to dollars is pretty hard. So I don't think we have that concrete information today. We have seen some pretty significant improvements, though. I mean, we've seen some teams that move faster. Anecdotally, we've seen that the teams everyone associate with being our most productive teams are the teams that score the highest on our social metrics. We've also seen that teams that are more social or more involved in open source also are much better at things like continuous delivery and adapting to some of our new technologies. We've also seen that we've been able to sort of unlock some new abilities for teams that aren't developers. I mean, we've seen our policy and governance teams be able to move a lot faster using social coding techniques. So whereas it might have taken 6 months in the past to get a change to a policy based on something we learned, we had at least one episode in the last year where we realized something wasn't working, and that same day we had a pull request into the policy and we had it changed and published on our website for our internal development teams. So it is having an impact. It's just hard to put dollars on it right now.
But the fact that you have social metrics that you measure and that you're able to associate socialness with productivity, with quick change, with innovation, I think is pretty remarkable. Would anybody else like to share a story?
Yeah, I want to call out a few things. One is we've internally developed a sort of scorecard / score sheet where we scan GitHub for all the repositories that have a contributing.md in them, and then also have a scorecard using our gaming techniques to be able to say how many people have forked off those repositories, how many contributors have come back to them, how many pull requests do we have out there, which repositories are asking for help wanted tags so that people who do have that additional desire to go contribute to another repository can just pick up any one of those help wanted tags. And we've seen that just the whole gaming nature has encouraged a lot of our developers to be able to just go in and get their code base out there included in the score sheet. We're not using that directly to tie it into the ROI, but that's part of creating the excitement and enthusiasm in the community itself. 6 months ago, or maybe 8 months ago, there was a Bloomberg Business Week issue completely dedicated to code. And what was fascinating about that was, this was a really unique thing for me to actually observe, is that the journalists used GitHub to collaborate on the articles, collaborate on the editorial, etc. And so that was a really unique use of some of the tooling that has evolved over the past some time. And these are not coders, but they are embracing that whole, software is eating the world ideology. And that was a fascinating use of the whole InnerSource / collaboration. And that, to me, was immediate value that the business can see and feel, as opposed to some of the more intrinsic rewards that we get from our social collaboration.
Yeah, and one thing I'd want to add to that, it's interesting that where we're at in our journey, we don't have those metrics in place yet, but we certainly are already all in on the fact that we'll see the benefit for a lot of reasons, right? Because there's one aspect with respect to, just being able to measure, the pull requests, things like that, right? But at the same time, there's aspects that from a just from forking and things like that, but there's also the perspective of just simple reuse, right? So when you think about the fact that, if you've done something with code or a data model or something like that, if I can reuse that, right, and just make, changes to it to go do my new thing, then we certainly see that. So we haven't quite figured yet how to measure those things, but I think there's so many opportunities that we see with the reuse, with the the long tail development being cut down, the ability of our workforce to be able to really digest technology fast by example, right? Seeing what others have done. So we're all in. We just need to figure out what's the best way to measure that in simple ways without a lot of overhead. So that's what we're looking to do.
Yeah, I think this is a tough one because everyone wants those specific dollar metrics, but when you think about the irresistible piece I talked about, what does the business really want? They want fast development. They want customers to see our products faster. And so we measure a lot of things based on time to deployment. So we do 30,000 deployments to production in a quarter and things like that. So those are the types of things we're measuring. And it's interesting, we bought a company and then invested a couple of years worth of effort and then open sourced it. And it was interesting, even as you develop a product like OneOps, which is the tool I'm talking about, even when they were ready to open source it, they weren't really ready. It's amazing how much better you put quality, how much, a little fine point that you want to put on it. And the developers really are saying, okay, we're going to let this go out to the world. We need to do even more work on it. And just the quality level goes up as you continue to get developers who are contributing to open source. And that is just, that's just money in the bank for everyone, right? So all that is just gravy on top. And, I get that people want ROI on it, but it's there. Yeah. You don't need to spend too much time on it.
I think the point that you're making is a really interesting one. We talk about social engineering, you talk about cultural change. You feel very differently about your project when you're the only one looking at it. And that sense that your team felt when you were ready to open source, oh, no, it's not ready yet, that happens inside the company as well. When you have a culture of sharing things publicly, you feel like it's got to be a certain bar because other people are looking at it. And I think that drives a certain amount of positive impact as well. Sort of continuing on it's not all rainbows and apple pie, what are some of the challenges? And we'll make this go really fast. Just, a few words, each of you. What's your single biggest challenge in this initiative so far?
Let me say one thing. I called it the Kevin Cooney effect. There was a guy that used to work for us at eBay that ended up quitting the company because he was such the expert that everybody goes to you, right? And in the end, the guy wanted to code, right? He didn't want a code review, he wanted to code. And so how do you make sure that you have enough people in your organization that can do code reviews and pieces like that so you don't lose your best engineers? Because your best engineers really want to spend time coding and not looking at everybody else's code, right? So that's probably the one thing.
You said about challenges, right?
Single biggest challenge.
Yeah, single biggest, okay.
Single.
In our company, recently, we now began to need more partner companies to collaborate with. And it is a little hard to collaborate because we have a firewall. InnerSource is all about open source plus firewall, right? So, and we have to jump over our own firewall to get in touch with the other company. But if it's open source, I mean, if we jump to the open world, it's just open source. But we still need to protect ourselves and also the partner company, just because we have business reasons and security reasons. So we just need to put more firewalls on it. And what we did in our company is to actually create another GitHub instance to separate the concerns. One instance is for our own internal instance with publicly open, and the other is for collaboration with the other company. And I'm not sure if this is the best way to do it. Maybe you can just merge it into one instance, but yeah, we are now walking around with that way.
I think the one big challenge that I see is the 120% thing, which is there's not enough hours in a day for us to make sure that the 10%, the extra 20% that I want to contribute to other projects, that time, where do I get that time from? And convincing everybody to be able to generate that time. So that's the challenge that I see.
And I agree with most of all what was said, right? Because there's the time, but I still think the single most thing is probably just that mental paradigm shift, and I tied that to culture, right? Because as you're thinking about this is a different way of working, opening my stuff up, and there's half of the business that gets it. They want to open it up. They want you to give them feedback. They want to even if they've got solutions to something you've got, they want to contribute to it, right? But then there is a segment, of the company that has to have that awareness to think differently. And I would tie that to culture as probably the primary thing. Because once people understand the opportunity and all this free stuff, I mean, it's kind of like, well, how do I sign me up for it? But if you don't have the awareness and you're not thinking that way, I'd still tie it to culture and say it's probably the single most thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'd say the thing that probably causes the most grief for me anyway is the tension between security and the productivity of being open. So on the one hand, we do want people to be very open. We want them to be exchanging ideas and to be innovating. But on the other hand, we don't really want people walking out the door with all of our best source code. And those things are very often at odds. And so there's a constant conversation about how do we balance those things and manage that risk.
So before we go into the next question, we're getting to the sort of last 10, 15 minutes of the panel. We do want to save some time at the end for your questions, so this is a good time to start thinking about them because we will open it up and ask for your feedback. My next question, picking off of your last comment, Jeff, is you mentioned security. Again, following again on the theme of it's not rainbows and apple pie, is there anything that would make you turn away from InnerSourcing? Is there anything that would say, yeah, this open stuff is great, we're not going to do that anymore because it doesn't work for us? Joan?
I think it would probably be security. If there was a security breach of some sort, it's going to make you close your doors, right? So it's probably the single most thing. We have an incredibly tight relationship with our cybersecurity team, so we do that. And
whether you like it or not, you do.
Well, and we make some amazing products around security too, so that kind of helps us. But that's probably the single most thing. I think that what becomes second is really as you think about opening up your repo, and your code is it's your baby, it's your prized thing, right? If you start getting negative feedback and maybe some aspect of cyberbullying, right, then those things could cause you to close things up because you don't want to hear that, right? So some things that we've started to do is start putting practices in place, right, that talk about code of conduct, right, and sharing a little bit more about our architecture and how we intend to take these solutions. So if you want to give some feedback, we definitely want that. But if you have an issue with the architecture or the direction, we try to be clear to say what we intend to do and what we don't intend to do with it. So I think communication and collaboration and just setting your expectations are key things for success.
Jeff, did you have some specific things that you wanted to say about the explorations around security at IBM?
So we've certainly tried a number of things. It's an ongoing discussion we have with our security office about how we're going to manage this. I mean, I personally am pretty optimistic about what we can do with automation and analytics. So there are things we can do to detect credentials in our code. There are things we can do to try to identify what pieces of code need greater scrutiny. Are there abnormal access patterns that we should maybe flag early and track down? So I tend to be optimistic about where we're going, and I think there's a lot more we could do if we could get better at quantifying the actual risk and the actual cost, because in some cases it might actually just be cheaper to let someone steal our code than to actually protect it. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a really cool space. I mean, it makes a really interesting problem, but there's a very long and arduous conversation that needs to happen there for sure.
But I think it's worth the fight. You've got to work with your security teams to make this happen. And we can't go back, right? There's just no way that this could ever go back. When we first started Labs, we put all our code out on the regular GitHub, but it was before GitHub Enterprise. And after a while, we were like, yeah, that's probably not a good idea. Let's bring it inside. And I'm really proud of some of the companies like Slack is now talking about encryption and things like that. I mean, these are the kind of things that we need to protect from unauthorized access. You know, we got to handle our own authorized access problems, but you know, the ability to secure your content in flight and things like that are things that GitHub and Slack and everybody need to work on, just so we don't have to worry about those kinds of problems as well.
Yeah, I think that ship has sailed. I don't think we are going the other direction. What I think we do need to continue to improve upon is, the whole mentoring culture, the empathy that you talk about, because there's different cultures involved, there's different personalities involved. It's humans, it's not machines. And so from a developer experience perspective, my focus is on making sure that our development community continues to understand and continues to grow with understanding those cultural differences, because we are a global organization. And it's not just about the global diversity that we have, it's just different personality types and how they may come across to somebody else, whether they mean to or not. And it's really understanding that and transforming that into a more mentorship culture and coaching around that space is something that I really do want to push for.
Yeah, one thing I would just add to that is something that Jeff said, but I think it's echoed by everyone as well, is when you have this openness, when you have this transparency, when you can see what's happening, it gives you the ability to get the data, to build the analytics, to build the automation, which you couldn't do if everyone was working in their private silos. So I think that's it's a powerful way in which this inner sourcing actually helps you with some of these big business problems as well.
And I was to say something that Panna's comment highlighted for me, or kind of brought back to mind for me, was that we've really kind of gone on a shift at IBM away from being really adamant about compliance and enforcement. We've learned from a couple of potentially painful experiences that if you go into someone's team and you say, hey, you can't do this because this is a security policy, or you can't do this because this is our inner source or open source policy or whatever, more times than not, they actually have a really good reason why they're doing what they're doing. I mean, they kind of know how to do their job most of the time. And so we've really shifted back on that empathy note to flagging things, providing visibility to things, but then to really invite a conversation. We'd like to understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, and then we can talk about whether or not it's actually helping or hurting our business. Maybe they don't know, or maybe they know something we don't. And in many cases, they have. I mean, we've learned things about our own business by having these conversations.
And let me say one last thing. When it comes to being open by default, which is something we really are driving in our company, we do recognize that we do have encryption code. People have to be really careful with certain things. So we try to give people a sense of just awareness of what not to open, right? So because we don't want to get in any trouble, right? Or we don't want to have
shaming.
Yeah. So that there are some practices that we try to share with people, and we're maturing in that. We still have a ways to go, but there's some things you don't want to open up, and that's okay.
One thing I'll add that is a people element of this. I remember, say 5 years ago when you're going through like promotion discussions with your teams and you have the picture of the engineer up and a list of their teams and the projects they worked on. Now it's very common for our laptops to be out and looking at the GitHub repos to see like, okay, what has this person really done? What's their code like? And how many times have they contributed and that sort of thing. It's really, from an HR perspective as well, really figuring out who your best people are and the folks there has really changed the way people think about that. And I'll tell you, that's one of the first things that people are really surprised. Wait, my VP is looking at my code to see whether I'm ready to be promoted or not. Oh, like, holy cow. And that's the kind of people and the teams you want to build inside, a startup type culture, and it's awesome. It's a totally better way to do it than the quote unquote popularity contest that used to happen, right?
Yeah. One last question, then we'll open it up to the audience. One of the things that I'm really impressed about with respect to this panel is the diversity of industries that we represent here: media, social, retail, enterprise software. I would love to hear your perspective on, are there differences, are there ways that you apply the concept of inner sourcing that's different because of the kind of industry you're in? Panna, maybe you can lead this off.
Sure. Our financial product is our core product that we provide, which is the Bloomberg terminal. And as I said earlier, our competitive advantage is being able to deliver the functionality as quickly as possible to meet the industry needs. And so we often have to collaborate on delivering a feature or a functionality as quickly as possible. And some of this collaborative nature has allowed us to move our own destiny forward, which is if I'm waiting on somebody, I'm able to now self-help myself because of the inner source concepts being introduced, because I no longer have to wait on you to complete my work, complete the work that I'm depending on. I can submit a pull request, we can go through the review process, and voila, we're out there. So I think from a delivering fast perspective, while we always worked in that manner, it's just made it easier.
I think Joan and I have kind of the same perspective on this, which is, it's hard to determine. I'm in the retail industry, but what does that mean exactly? I'm building web applications for my customers. I got mobile. I'm open sourcing our framework for React on September 29th called Electrode. We're building payment gateways. I have data scientists that are working on pricing algorithms and search systems. I've got warehouse management systems. So, each one of these has their own unique aspects to how they develop code and the type of technologists they're working with. So I don't really think it's a retail thing or an enterprise software thing. I think it works in pretty much any part. So I'm maybe security is the one aspect where you don't open it completely, but even that we do quite a bit.
I just wanted to add that to your comment, it reminded me we have something called Data for Good Exchange. So it's building upon this whole, and we're sponsoring it, I think it's next week or the week after. It's called D4, it's a cryptic acronym, Data for Good Exchange, so GX at the end. But basically, it's about all the public data that's available, and we heard in the keynote earlier today about the government data that's available. But it's really about leveraging and bringing communities together about how we can use this data to actually create an impact in the world. And Bloomberg partners with a lot of these communities to actually be able to collaborate on using data for good exchange. So I just wanted to make a plug for that.
Awesome. So we're down to less than 2 minutes. I'd love to welcome anybody who's got a question to come up. Is anybody out there? Yes, please come up. There's a microphone right there.
I was just going to ask you, actually. I mean, do you collect analytics for people using their own GitHub repos within companies, and do they behave differently than repos that are on the web?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So we obviously, we try to protect information and all of that stuff. We care deeply about privacy. What we have seen, and this is actually in the Octaverse report that Chris shared earlier, we do see. We have two concepts. One is sort of big social, which is like in our larger community, what are the interactions? Who are people following? How are things happening? And then we have what I call small social. That's small team collaboration, where how does a small group of people get together and work on a project and collaborate? And what we have found is that in those smaller teams is where most of our activity, most of our engagement happens. And that's not too surprising that while the larger community, because of its scale, has such a huge impact, in many cases, the most engaged teams, the most activity is inside the smaller groups and inside our orgs.
Hi. Just beyond
Please introduce yourself as well, because it's so cool to hear these voices.
Mark Huber, Cox Automotive. Beyond just purchasing software, purchasing something like GitHub Enterprise and getting it installed and technically available, can you talk about some of the practical techniques that you've used within your companies to get the engagement, get people informed, get people who otherwise wouldn't participating in these internal initiatives?
Yeah, this one's actually pretty interesting for my team. So I think there were a lot of people in IBM who thought when we deployed GitHub Enterprise, all of a sudden everything would just be awesome. We'd just be social everywhere. And so we measured it, and it didn't really happen. And so we started asking why and digging into this. And so one thing we did try was, let's go find everyone who's creating private repositories and let's create a bot that engages them. Let's ask them why. Let's talk about what are bad reasons for private repositories, what are good reasons for private repositories. And so that's something we want to push on a lot more, is this sort of very contextualized sort of surgical engagement using a combination of analytics and automation and human interaction.
Right, and I think for Hewlett Packard Enterprise, I mean, a similar thing, but we certainly can see what's private, what's public, and happen to have a user experience team. So of course we want to understand why people have certain behaviors. So we want to make sure that we understand what are the issues, right? Some of it is just purely awareness, right? GitHub's a wonderful tool, but if you don't do the naming right, if you don't give good descriptions, people can't find stuff, right? The amazing part that I find with GitHub is that if you're in a big company, you really can have a very small team, small company experience, because if the guy's got some kernel code over in China, you don't know, you don't care, but you can get to him and you can get to that code. So I think one of the things that we're doing is a digital revolutionization, which is really bringing awareness to everyone in the company about the power of it. And I think that's what we're doing. That's a game changer for us.
How about one more answer and then we'll move on, because I want to give folks a chance to ask questions. Yeah, here, go.
In my company, we use Line as a chat tool. I think I recommend to use some more chatting for making the environment and the culture more fun. And like in GitHub, there's an emoticon, right? You can add the emoji, and I think that's wonderful to express the emotions to your colleagues. And I think every pull request, maybe you should add that one. So yeah.
Thank you.
Next question.
Hi, Aaron Yem. I'm with the Royal Bank of Canada. So I have two questions. I'll maybe cheat a little bit. Hopefully it'll be quick. I was curious what type of structures you have within your organizations for setting up the policies, or basically figuring out how you're going to manage source code. And two, do you have situations where you actually have code that's not owned by a team, but maybe one person created it, and then how do you manage who owns that code afterwards?
The way Walmart Labs works is we have a small team, a tools team that effectively manages Slack and the repositories and a few other Jira and Confluence and all those pieces. But they don't really control any of it. They're best practices and the things that we do on InnerSourcing, and they run our training group. But again, it's only, I'd say, 4 people in that whole group out of a 2,500 person team. And so as a result, it's effectively crowdsourced. And I think, back to the earlier question, it's all about having teams that you can give good examples of. This team is doing a great job. Everybody else should be doing what they're doing, and sort of following that model, because I do think it does take some time to pull it in. I forgot what the second question was.
Well, one was like who owns code if it's someone owns?
Yeah, the last person that touched it? No, it's not that. But we don't have, I mean, in the end, that's the nice part about GitHub and all that, is you can really tell who created it and who the owner is. And frankly, that changes over time. So we just look at the owner tree and don't really worry about it. I don't think that's ever come up that I can think about. So I'm not sure it's an issue
Panna,
anymore.
do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I'm just going to say we haven't solved that just yet. More from a perspective of we created this, it was crowdsourced, it's a new thing that got developed, it's a tool, say for example. Now who owns it? Who owns the operational burden of it, and who takes that support burden on? We do have a central tools team, but it's not like we can dump it over to the wall to them. And that's something we're still working through to say, how does the community in the open source world deal with it, and how do we bring that in-house to say, how do we create ownership around it? I think the challenging part about the ownership is not about who owns the code. The challenging part is who owns the operational burden that comes with that. And that's something we haven't really sorted out just yet.
Hi, I'm Iliko Vancha. I'm with the OpenStack Foundation. And first of all, thank you for the panel. I think it is really amazing. You're all in this journey and shared experiences and advantages, but we are also touched on challenges and cultural change, which is really not easy to go through. So I would be curious about whether you can share what was your main motivation and driving force to start this whole thing when you started to do open source, look into InnerSource, how to embrace all these things. So what was the decision point when you decided that, okay, this will be the path forward for us?
Yeah, for HP, it's I think the major thing is time to market, right? I mean, so a high pressure market, looking at how do we accelerate our workforce, and we just saw the opportunity to cut out a lot of waste. And simply, if you think about how many times people reinvent the wheel, and it's just a no-brainer, right? If you have the ability to basically reuse something, and accelerate your ability to deliver faster, that was a major catalyst for us. At the same time, everybody's under the pressure to drive operational costs down, right? So you can do faster, you can do things cheaper, faster, and it just seems like a natural win for us, like a no-brainer.
I'm just going to say that there are people waiting to get into this room for the next thing. So one more answer, we'll do one last question, and then we'll wrap up.
Well, being a developer myself, my first primary motivation was really about the developer experience aspect of it, and it was really about empowering the developers. So my effort was primarily grassroots driven, and I wanted us to feel empowered to be able to make that change within the organization.
Last question.
All right, last but not least, thank you very much. Enjoyed it. So I'm Stefan. I'm from the Nervous Schools at KGI, and I was actually wondering, at what point in the process would you actually turn an InnerSource project into an open source project, and what kind of decisions go behind that? So for example, NASA recently released a lot of their APIs that they had internally not publicly released for a long time. So is it an ethical decision? What kind of considerations go into that?
It's a great question. I talked a little bit about OneOps and our decision there. We bought a company, then invested 24 people for 2 years on it, and then decided it would be better for this technology to be out because other people can contribute to connection points and that sort of thing. The same thing's going through. We built a framework called Electrode that's going to open source on September 29th. That's really a React framework. And again, it's a best practices tool set for things like CI/CD and developer tools and how you do dynamic rendering from a desktop or on the web and things like that. And those types of capabilities, I mean, I can develop that, and we have a great team that can do it, but we can do it much better. And frankly, it's the right thing to do. As we contribute, we feel great about taking, and we need to contribute back. If you're consuming open source, you should be investing in your teams to contribute back to open source as part of your corporate policy. That's just the way it should be.
Okay. Thank you so much.